Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we sort through the source material to find the insights that really matter. We're here to skip the noise and get right to the knowledge.
Today, we are looking at something pretty fascinating. It's a personal self-assessment, a week 47 review from November 2025. It tracks everything in huge detail: health, injury recovery, and some really ambitious hobbies.
That's right. And our mission today is very focused. There's this incredible tension in the source material, isn't there? You have this necessary focus on rest. He's dealing with a relapsed knee injury, and that's clashing directly with this ambition, this desire for performance.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking for where he managed to adapt, where innovation happened, and also what core structures gave him that stability when everything else kind of slowed to a crawl.
It's all about resilience, really.
It is. We're basically examining the foundations, both metabolic and psychological, that keep things steady when your physical output just tanks.
Okay, so let's start right there at the foundation. Health and wellness. The source makes it clear that long-term resilience is, the most important thing. So let's start with sleep.
On the surface, the numbers look great. The metric for total sleep quantity was, and I'm quoting here, excellent.
What does that mean in hours?
It means an average of 7.57 hours a day, which is a really solid jump from the week before, and it puts him comfortably over his 7-hour target. So if you're just looking at volume, it's a job done.
But, and this is where it gets interesting, that's not the whole story, is it?
Not at all. Despite getting the hours in, consistency was called a severe challenge. The plan was to be asleep by midnight or earlier, and he missed that on 6 out of 7 nights.
Wow, 6 out of 7.
And that's the quantity versus quality paradox. The notes highlight 2 days in particular with highly fragmented sleep. We're talking split sessions, like 2 hours of sleep, then 5 hours later, or even 5 hours and then just a 1-hour nap.
Ouch. That is not restorative sleep. I mean, if your body is trying to heal an injury, why even track the hours if you know the quality is that broken?
Well, that's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of what metrics are for, doesn't it? When sleep is that fragmented, you're just not getting those deep restorative cycles, your REM and deep sleep, which are absolutely essential for physical healing.
So his body got the time, but not the actual repair work.
Precisely. The body was demanding rest, but the actual routine that supports good rest was, for all intents and purposes, falling apart.
Okay, so from rest to activity. Here we see the impact of that knee injury pretty clearly. The average daily step count was 5,681.
And the source calls that an appropriate decrease from the week before, which was over 7,600. So it's a very conscious decision to pull back.
He missed his 6,000-step goal most days, but it was intentional. There was the knee, but also heavy rain mentioned. One day was as low as, just over 2,000 steps?
Yeah, 2,092. And you have to imagine, for someone who tracks this stuff, that number probably felt like a failure, but it wasn't.
It was a strategic choice.
It was a negotiation, really. It's the pressure of the daily metric versus the absolute necessity of long-term recovery. He made the mature decision. Health over a number on a chart.
So he points out there wasn't much intentional exercise, just things like raking leaves or groceries, and that led him to a new focus for the next week.
Right. He wants to shift his focus entirely to exercises on recovery, which I think is a brilliant reframing. It's moving from tracking output to tracking the process of healing itself.
So sleep is a mess. Activity is way down by necessity. What was holding things together? Where did the stability come from?
This is where we see the power of habits that are just on autopilot. The foundation, the metabolic and dietary routines, they were the anchor.
Absolutely. The source says his weight showed excellent stability. A tiny gain of just 0.05 kilograms. I mean, that's basically nothing. It went from 68.50 to 68.55 kilograms.
And what's really fascinating about that, what you have to notice, is that this happened with lower activity and more meals out during the week.
Right. Normally, if you're less active in eating out, you'd expect things to shift.
For sure. It suggests his core habits are so dialed in that they can absorb those kinds of shocks. It really points to stability coming from autopilot systems, not conscious willpower.
Especially when that willpower is being spent on just managing an injury.
Exactly. Willpower runs out. But your body relies on these embedded structures. The source even says that he doesn't intentionally practice intermittent fasting anymore, but he still sort of unconsciously follows the patterns.
Which patterns are we talking about here? Just for anyone listening.
The document mentions the 16.8 and 5.2 methods. So 16.8 is eating in an 8-hour window each day. 5.2 is eating normally 5 days a week and then cutting calories way back on 2 days.
The point is, the timing of his eating and his simple home-cooked meals, oatmeals, cooked salads, miso soup, that all provided this bedrock of consistency.
And that consistency carried over into his mental game, too. He kept up with his meditation, just a minute or two of sitting, sometimes walking meditation while raking leaves.
And his mood was described as stoic as usual. So stability through these little micro practices.
That stoicism is so important. It means his internal state wasn't being thrown all over the place by the injury or the lack of activity. It's a huge stabilizing force.
Now, this week also had a kind of aha moment, a really big personal discovery about how he documents his own life.
Yeah, this was fascinating. He was doing some light reading, but making no progress on his health book. But he had this realization about his own writing style. He calls it longitudinal writing.
And what does that mean?
It's a habit he's had since he was a kid. He would track his progress on, long-term hobbies and interests, day by day, writing down insights.
So these weekly reviews aren't just a chore for him. It's like his fundamental way of engaging with his own life.
Yes. And once you realize that about yourself, it changes everything. It's not just a task, it's a tool. It means you can design your projects to fit that style. You can make the tracking part of the reward.
The process becomes as important as the outcome.
And that stability in his documentation is what keeps the long-term vision alive, even when the daily numbers, like his step count, are not looking so great.
Okay, that is a perfect bridge to our next section. Because those long-term projects are exactly where the injury was causing the biggest problems. Gardening, home improvement, a lot of it just ground to a halt.
Yeah, the backlog was getting pretty big. He had plants that urgently needed to be potted, curtains to install, a drawer to fix, grout work to do. You can feel the inertia building up.
But the delay on one project, a simple plant rack, actually sparked a new idea. A more integrated one.
It did. He started thinking about a single unit that could be both a plant display and a fish rack. It's a great example of how a constraint, not being able to build the simple thing, can actually lead to a much more complex and interesting solution.
But the real breakthrough, the thing that just shattered all that inertia, it came from a really unexpected place.
Fishkeeping.
Fishkeeping. He started working on turning this yellow-blue rack into a new fish area, a project that had been on the back burner for years. What was the catalyst? What changed?
It was so specific. It was discovering the right fish species for him to keep and breed. It sounds like a tiny detail, but it was everything.
So it moved the project from this vague someday idea to a concrete mission.
Exactly. The why suddenly became incredibly compelling. It wasn't build a fish area, it was build the perfect home for this specific fish. And that systematic thinking, that shift in approach, it started a chain reaction.
It jumped domains. This spark of motivation carried over into his photography, another long-delayed hobby.
This is the strategic connection we were looking for. The problem-solving method he used for the fish, find the optimal component first, then design the system, he immediately applied it to his photography gear problem. He decided to flip the usual strategy on its head.
So instead of buying a camera body first, which is what most people do,
he decided to start with the lens. The new method is, 1, define your style. 2, find the perfect lens for that style, and only then, 3, do you pick a camera system that works with that lens.
That makes so much sense. It saves you from making really extensive mistakes.
It does. The example in the source is architectural photography. So you'd prioritize finding a great, affordable, wide-angle lens, like the Viltrox 20mm f2.8.
And for anyone listening who's into photography, what does that specific choice tell us?
It says you're prioritizing function and affordability for your chosen style. You need a wide field of view, and the Viltrox delivers that with autofocus on a budget. Once you've identified that key component, the number of camera bodies you have to consider shrinks dramatically. The whole decision becomes strategic, not emotional.
Even though the injury meant his photo walks were just, trips to the grocery store, the mental work, the planning became incredibly sharp.
So let's kind of pull this all together. What's the story here?
Well, the self-tracking shows us a metabolic foundation, the diet and weight, that was so stable it could handle the shock of an injury and the forced rest that came with it.
Right, even with a chaotic sleep schedule. And at the same time, the stability of his mind, which is rooted in that lifelong habit of longitudinal writing, it kept the big picture, the long-term vision, completely intact.
And the inertia, all that project backlog caused by the injury, was finally broken by this one tiny external spark. finding the right fish.
And that passion then became the driver that let him apply this really advanced strategic thinking to everything else, from his gardening rack to his photography gear.
So the big takeaway for you listening to this is that sometimes when you're forced to slow down, the key to getting moving again on your big projects isn't just more willpower.
No, sometimes it's about finding a single passionate breakthrough in a totally different area of your life and then using that new way of thinking to unlock everything else.
And going back to that self-discovery, understanding that your core habit is something like longitudinal writing, that in itself is just transformative.
Hmm, it is. And it brings up a final, really important question for you to think about. If success isn't defined by perfect daily consistency, like we saw with the fragmented sleep or the delayed projects, but by the pattern you see over the long haul in your documentation.
Then what does that do to our idea of failure?
Exactly. How does the act of longitudinal documentation change our definition of failure? If today wasn't perfect, if you missed the goal, but you recorded it meticulously as just one data point in a journey that spans decades, was it really a failure? Or was it just the information you needed for your next adaptation?
A fascinating way to think about your own habits and your own progress. Thank you for letting us dive deep into your sources today. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.